And I'd say the biggest thing that has impacted us is co-teaching because I really value when the students can have relationships and connect with multiple teachers because I'd say one of my biggest challenges is managing missed shifts.
Hey there, I'm Rachel Airing, and you're listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. Get inspired as we discuss creative resources, trends in piano pedagogy, ways to grow your income and streamline your studio, and new ways to engage your students each week. If you are a teacher who wants to go beyond the method books to create an innovative studio that fosters lifelong music makers, you've come to the right place. Hello, piano teachers. Welcome to the show. Today I'm talking with Whitney Maxwell, who owns a multi-teacher studio in Iowa. One of the things that Whitney is passionate about is giving each child in her studio individualized attention and making them feel special, even though there might be hundreds of students walking through the door each week. So today I'm asking her about that, as well as many other aspects of how she runs a successful piano studio. Here's a little about Whitney before we get into the interview. Whitney Maxwell grew up reading beautiful classical music, studying for 10 years under a Juilliard and Harvard trained teacher and concert pianist. She loved her piano teacher and she loved her lessons. But after some time in corporate America, Whitney somehow ended up traveling the world as a full-time dueling piano player. She has been teaching since 2001 and has extensive experience in a variety of curriculums, teaching methods, and lessons styles. She currently runs Bloom Music Studio in Iowa, which is a multi-teacher piano studio teaching pianists ages 3 and up. Here's my interview with Whitney. Hi, Whitney. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to talk with you today and get to know a little about your studio. So first of all, can you introduce yourself and tell us about the studio that you have there?
Yes. Hi, Rachel. Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure and an honor. My name is Whitney, and I opened our studio, which is Bloom Music Studio, in 2021. It was born out of COVID because my career path got readjusted in 2020, like so many people. And I did a pivot at the end of 2020 and signed a lease and opened Bloom in January of 2021. We offer piano for ages 3 and up, and we are currently in the process of thinking about adding a couple other instruments as well.
So right now it's just piano, is that right?
It is just piano. We're dabbling in guitar. We've done some workshops, but we haven't pulled the trigger for a full weekly offering yet.
I would love to hear a little bit more about that transition because I remember, COVID, it was a weird time and it was like we would think it was over and then it wasn't over. That must have been a little scary opening a space and renting a space during that time. How was that for you?
It was overwhelming and daunting and all of the things. In hindsight, as I look back now, I think that the timing actually worked really well in our favor because by that point we were about 10 months into COVID, and we were craving social interaction, we were craving connection, and it ended up being just worked out. I'm trying to think of the word. It was it came together in the most perfect way for me and hopefully for our families too. And yeah, then it just kind of grew from there.
Yeah, and we'll talk some more about the growth. But I would love to go a little bit farther back. How did you get into teaching? You mentioned that you had another career previously. I don't know if you want to share anything about that, but what kind of led you into teaching to begin with?
Sure. I started teaching in 2001, and my mom is also a piano teacher. She was actually never mine, but I grew up with her teaching full time. And I went to school and got a full time corporate job after I graduated. But I started teaching in the evening simply to supplement my income. And from there, it just kind of grew. I always had her to bounce things off of, and to this day, we cannot stop talking about all things teaching. We try and we cannot. But I started part time after work, and then there was a time in the earlier 2000s, I want to say like 2006, where I ended up being featured in the Des Moines Register, which is the Iowa newspaper. And initially, I was just supposed to be in the publication that was for or not even singles. It was for 20s and 30s. It was for young adults, and it was kind of an offshoot of the Register. And I had reached out to them and said, "Hey, I'm doing this special kind of lesson where it works really well for adults, especially. And so I'm looking to grow my studio over the noon hour, and I'm hoping to find adults who want to learn piano on their lunch break." And so they did a little article about me, and it nothing. I think I got one inquiry from that publication. And what they forgot to tell me is that sometimes the Des Moines Register picks up articles that we're in. It's called Juice, and features them in the Register. And so a week later, my dad called me at like 6:30 in the morning, and he said, "Just a heads up, you're on the front page of the Register today." And okay. And so I went, at the time I had about 30 students. And after that article, I went from 30 to 90. And so I I quit my job. I worked at Wells Fargo at the time. And so I quit kind of in a temporary way. I said, I might be back, but I'm going to go explore this. And needless to say, I never went back. So I taught full time for a few years. And then in 2009, I decided I wanted to try to be a dueling piano player. And I'd seen a dueling piano show in Chicago, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. I want to try that. And so I moved to Branson, Missouri, and I thought that was going to just be for the summer. My mom actually finished the school year with my students. She did April and May, and then I thought I'll probably be back in the fall. And that was in 2009, and I didn't come back. And so I was a full-time dueling piano player for until COVID.
Wow, what an interesting story. Oh my goodness. So there's so many things that I would love to ask you about. One thing that I think piano teachers would be interested in is the fact that you reached out to a newspaper, because I think sometimes we'll see on people's websites or wherever they were featured somewhere, but we don't know how that happened. So you actually reached out to the newspaper, right? And have you done that other times to get featured in other publications at all?
I did reach out to a local news anchor when I opened in 2021, because I believe she had posted that she was looking for a certain type of story. And so I'd have to go back and look, even, I don't even remember what that was. So I reached out and I said, I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but this is my story. And she said, that isn't exactly what I'm looking for, but I'd still love to come talk to you. And so that was fun. She ended up coming later that fall, and she did a story on us for the local the local news.
Yeah, that's really cool. Because I think we always think like, oh, the news people, they have plenty of stuff to cover or whatever, but they're looking for stories as well, just like we're looking for places to be featured. So I love that you did that. All right. So I want to talk about your website a little bit, because when I looked at your website, a couple things stood out. First of all, your personality came through your website. And I don't know if you have any advice for other teachers about how to do that, but I could just tell by looking at it that you're a fun teacher, that it's a really fun, welcoming environment. What advice would you give teachers about infusing their personality into their website? It's so hard to do that.
I don't have the answer. I don't. I just know that I've kind of honed in on our fundamental goals, values, vision, and I just want to put that out in the world so that it attracts the people that are looking for it, and it becomes just a beautiful mutual relationship. Because if someone is looking for a serious studio where they are doing contests and they are, very regimented, we wouldn't be the fit for that. But for the family that wants, a lighthearted, connecting experience, we are their people. And so really thinking hard about, because I've noticed too, as you grow and evolve as a teacher, you just change. I think about, I have some younger teachers now, and I think about I am just a completely different human than I was 20 years ago. And so as you start to really ground into what matters to you, it becomes even easier to be so fully authentic that you find each other, that what put out into the world is what you're going to bring in as well.
That's really good. Yeah. So knowing who you're trying to attract, being clear on that piece, and then trying to put that into your marketing and everything. Yeah. And at the top of your website, it says piano lessons done differently. So tell me, what is different about your piano lessons, and why do you think that piano lessons need to be done differently?
One of the things that's really important to me in my marketing is never to put any other type of lesson down, because I grew up, probably like so many people, in a traditional private lesson. It was a 30-minute one on one, and then it went to longer as I got older. And I had an incredibly positive experience. I was very close with my teacher. I did practice when I was growing up, and it worked. So it worked well. I have taught privately. I taught privately for years. And so it's interesting how I love how there's so many different ways to do it, and not one way is right. What I have found that I love now is having different offerings for different age groups so that we can keep the experience really play based when they're younger. And then as they are developmentally ready, we can work more towards focus and independence. And so for our older kids, and when I say older, we typically go about second grade and up, we are in a lab format. And what I love about lab is that it creates an independent learner, because in a 30-minute one-on-one lesson, typically the teacher might show the student what to do, and then the student might try it, but there isn't generally time to really learn the material. You get exposed to it. She probably explains it to you, and then you go home and hopefully practice right away. And if you don't, then you might have to relearn it yourself during the week. And so that can create a cycle where it can become frustrating at home. The progress may or may not move forward because, everyone has off practice weeks as well. So if the kids aren't practicing and they come back, they may just end up starting right where they left off and redoing the same lesson. And so with the lab lesson, it's 55 minutes. And so we get a lot more time. And our goal is that, especially our beginner kids, they leave the lesson knowing the material, and then practice at home, in theory, is just reinforcing what they know. And even when they don't practice at home during the week, they pass songs every week. They make progress every week. And I think it's really interesting when you do step away and give them some privacy to learn, and you give them some independence. You even are nudging them into independence, because if you're sitting there, they're more likely to ask you for answers and to ask you for help. And so if you step away and kind of say, you can do this, can you turn the page and figure anything out on your own? Can you find your hand position? Can you identify what information can you identify without me? Because ultimately, we want them to be independent learners, because that's what will create a lifelong musician. So, does that answer the done differently question?
Yes, it does. And I would love to just dive in a little deeper to your lab's structure. So tell me how many kids there are, and then is it a rotating thing where you're working one on one and rotating around? What's the structure of your lab lessons?
So, the number of keyboards in the room depends on the size of the room, but we typically work at about a 1 to 4 teacher to student ratio. And so, in our larger rooms, we'll have more teachers, but we don't have a set rotation, because if a student needs 7 minutes to dig through a passage, then they can take it. I know that there's so many cool ways to do it, and I've seen like a 20 20 20 rotating type of lesson where there are set stations for a set number of minutes, and we don't do that. Ours is a little bit more fluid. We spend on average 40 to 45 minutes learning pieces and at the piano. And then the last 10 to 15 is theory, games, some type of off the bench activity.
And is that all together then? They do that all together?
That can depend. We're multi-level. And so if we're bringing kids together for theory, we will still differentiate at the theory portion. That's something that's so important to me, is the differentiation within each lesson, because even in our younger classes where it's a synchronous learning style, we still, our curriculum itself allows for differentiation for different levels. And then even yeah, so we do that in all of our offerings. And I find that that is such like a beautiful marriage of the benefits of private learning and group learning, because there are benefits to both.
Yeah, I agree. And this idea of teaching them how to practice in that lab setting, I really like that. I've just recently heard more about that, I think, in the benefits of teaching them how to be independent practicers in the lesson lab time. Talk to me about communicating to parents the benefits of the group lessons, because I know a lot of parents still think one on one is best and they're not going to get the individualized attention that they want or need if they don't do one on one. Have you struggled to communicate that to parents, or have parents been pretty receptive?
I do think that having the website really clear brings in the people that want what we're offering. But one thing that has been so powerful to me is that progress happens through the time spent at the piano. Progress doesn't happen with a teacher instructing a student what to do. The student moves forward when they're able to spend the time doing the learning, playing the music. And so honestly, if in my experience, they move faster than in a private lesson in this setup.
And so the parents, you just tell the parents that, and then they're on board
Mhm.
for the most part.
For the most part, right. And once a student reaches a late intermediate, early advanced level, it's time. I mean, private lesson, if we need to dive into a longer lesson, just one on one to really do a lot of fine tuning and adding finesse, that's absolutely needed. The the majority, I saw a stat once, and I don't remember the details, but the number of level one lesson books that are sold, like if there are 100 level one lesson books, there are, these are not accurate, but there are 50 level two books and there are 30 level three books. And so because kids are in so many activities, and because everyone looks at piano in a different way, if piano is just a part of their journey, then this is, I think, such a great way to expose them in a really positive environment to music, to set them up for success to what they do next, whether it's band or not even a music activity. But the long, I don't also don't know what the longevity of an average piano student lifespan is. I've seen Right? I've seen, numbers like 18 months, 24 months. I think it really varies, but I do think that there's been a shift in kids today where they are more scheduled than ever, and we are one of, four to six activities. And so it once they once they decide that piano is their thing and they want to continue it, then that we would potentially transition then. But I feel like we serve the largest market, and that would be the parents who want their kids to have a fantastic experience in music. And then if it's just for a short time, then that's okay too.
One of the things that you mentioned to me when we were discussing what we were going to talk about today is that you are passionate about forming a strong teacher student bond, even in these group settings. So you might have hundreds of students come through the door every week, but it's really important to you to have that strong student teacher bond. Can you talk a little about that and how you accomplish that?
First of all, it is such a work in progress always. Learning how to create the connection. I wish I could say it was a one and done thing. One of the first things that I did when we opened is I put a large blackboard up. It's a magnetic chalkboard, maybe. And I call it the planting positivity board because for Bloom. And I decided that every week there was going to be a question of the week. And then I put post-its out and they answer the question and put their post-it up. And then we also put out a box where they could create suggestions for the question of the week. So then it became, this week's question, what is your favorite ice cream? And then question by Louisa M. And so in my head, always just thinking of ways, how can we highlight them? How can we share them? What can we do that brings them together? So the board, they love answering that question. That's the first thing they do when they walk in. One thing that I need to do, I've wanted to do for a couple of years, but haven't pulled the trigger, is just having something up, probably in the waiting room. I'm not sure because we have multiple teaching rooms, but just having a progress wall where they can move their, cute little face along the track of either the units in the book or the book itself. I know a lot of studios do that where the kids get to see their progress, they get to see each other's progress. That also serves as a little bit of an intrinsic motivator, I think, or extrinsic that becomes intrinsic, where they're like, "Oh, I want to keep moving. My friends are moving." We do on the first week of every month, we started a growth mindset worksheet activity, and we do that together every week. And I'm choosing a growth mindset related word, and we are kind of diving into it and dissecting it and talking about how we can apply it to our lives, how we can apply it to learning, how we can apply it to piano.
Can you give us an example of the growth mindset words?
I think our first word was discipline. I know that February was self compassion in honor of Valentine's Day. We've had perseverance. I need to kind of think about my 24-month calendar, or even 36-month calendar, so they rotate through. We're taking the summer off from that, but we that's another thing that is just really important to me personally, is weaving anything that we can into the lesson for character development and growth mindset, things like that. We have a student mentorship program where when kids are 10 or older, they can come in and we make them a badge and they assist us and they listen to students when they're ready to be checked, because we will let the student pass the song on their own. We use a software that helps with grading notes and rhythms. And then when we go in to double check fingerings and hand position and things like that, the student mentors can participate in that. They can sit with the kids and help them and answer questions, and then they will help run the games and the theory time. So those are some of the first ideas that come to mind. But man, I just feel like I'm my wheels are always turning on how to help kids feel special and feel a part of it and just feel connected.
Yeah, you're building community throughout the studio, right?
That is just the underlying goal.
Okay. Do you use a specific curriculum across the board? Is everyone doing the same curriculum?
No, we use a few that are that are student dependent, I guess I would say.
Okay. I was just curious. Do you feel like this building community and all these different creative things that you're doing helps your retention rate? You were talking about the lifespan of a piano student. How has your retention rate been?
That is a great question, and I don't know. I have not done analytics
Well,
on
it's
our
hard to
studio.
compare too, because you're not in anyone else's studio. You only know what yours is, right?
Right, right. And the way we have been structuring our year is do an August to May school year, and then we do an optional summer session in the form of camps, 4-week sessions, and one-off activities. So I am definitely not the one to ask when it comes to numbers and tracking. When I think about the things that I'm juggling as the business owner, that is one that is the ball has been dropped.
That's okay. Honestly, numbers aren't my forte either. So even if you had numbers, I might not know what they meant. So we'll just let that one go. What has the feedback been from parents and students though about these unique things that you're doing?
So, as far as I know, very positive. I know that when we rolled out the word of the month for growth mindset, I got a few emails from parents thanking us and saying, we appreciate that you're doing this. So, as far as I know, it's positive.
Okay, I'm sure you would hear if it wasn't, right?
Right, right.
Do you have any other creative things in your studio? I know you do because I saw pictures of your dogs on your website and you even analyzed their Enneagram numbers, which
Oh
I
my
loved.
gosh. Right. Right. Yeah. Yes. So when I was traveling, when I was a full-time dueling piano player, I was on the road a lot of the time. And I got my first golden doodle when I was on the road. And even, through things like cruise contracts, I would be away for 4 or 6 weeks. And so I got my first dog, and then she is very, very, very social. So I got her a friend. And when I opened the studio, I realized I want them to be a part of this because my oldest girl, I did like a therapy certification with her with our local animal rescue league, and we went into schools. This was also not too long before COVID, and she just loved it. She's so social, and so I'm like, I'm going to bring them in, and so then that just ended up becoming part of the marketing. And I started learning how to do TikToks and reels, and I just started posting them in the reels. And so you certainly do not have to love dogs to come to us, but I do find that most love them. Most who come love animals. And so yeah, that's something kind of unusual. And then now there's more. And so we rotate them through, and yeah, the kids love them. If I could have more, I would, because there's a local art studio in the Des Moines area, and she fosters, and she does a lot of her offerings around her current fosters. So she might do a kitty unicorn camp. And so that at the end of the day, for each of the camp days, the kids get to, hang out with her foster kitties. And I always post on her stuff, and like, all the I can I sign up? It's like, is there an age limit for these activities? Because I think that would be so cool. So yeah, that's one thing that's kind of different.
I love that so much. So the conservatory that I manage, it's part of a K through 8 school, and the school principal has a golden doodle that he brings to school every day, who's like an emotional support trained dog. And the kids love that dog. I mean, she's the most famous person on campus by far. Everyone just adores her. So I know the kids just love, love, love the animals. So I'm sure that makes coming to lessons even more exciting, right?
We do find ourselves weaving puppy breaks into lessons when there's some overload. It's like, do you need to reset? Do you need a 30-second puppy break?
So I would like to ask you a little bit about growing and managing a team of teachers. I know that some of my listeners, either they're at that point where they're managing a few teachers, or they would like to be at that point. Maybe they're still teaching one-on-one, but they would love to have a team of teachers with them. Can you talk a little bit about, I don't know, just what it's like managing teachers, how you found your teachers, and how you, I guess, bring that sense of community to your teaching team as well?
Sure. This is also an area that I am, I just do not feel confident in yet. It's such a, I never ever imagined that I would be doing it. And, most days I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. But for me, what ended up happening is we grew to over 100, and I thought, I think it's time. I think it's time to look. And I think I found my first, I think I found her on Facebook, and I struck the gold mine with her. She's a K-5 music teacher, elementary music teacher, and she was, I can't even imagine what it was like walking into the chaos of my mind, because at that point I'd been running the studio for a year, and I was in over my head at that point with hours and students and things like that. And so she just jumped in, and after she had been there for probably 6 or 8 weeks, we opened classes for her. And that was a way that we were able to accommodate the wait list, because that's something that is really tricky. If you have someone on the wait list, they may only stay for so long, because when someone wants music, they probably want it now. And so one of the most common questions I see in the forums and the Facebook groups is, do I get a teacher and then try and find students, or do I have students ready? And there is no answer, because they are the chicken and the egg. I was pretty consistent on socials, and I was doing a lot in the community, really trying to put brand awareness out there and just continue to build. And so it worked out well, and I feel fortunate. I don't know exactly what it was. And then from there, it just continued. And I'd say the biggest thing that has impacted us is co-teaching, because I really value when the students can have relationships and connect with multiple teachers. Because I'd say one of my biggest challenges is managing missed shifts. And so when a teacher can't be there, we are constantly adjusting to cover classes, and it really doesn't ever feel very jarring, because the kids are able to work with multiple teachers on a regular basis. Because we got hit really hard, especially this 2025, that second semester, so January to May. We had a lot of missed teacher shifts, and I mean, it was illness and things that could not be helped. And so I love, in our larger rooms we have 8 keyboards, and so always two teachers, sometimes three. And I really value co-teaching. I value it for so many reasons. It helps us. It gives the newer teachers almost infinite time to be with someone else and not necessarily feel like they're on their own. And then it inherently creates community, because the kids are interacting with more than one adult.
That's really good advice. I like that a lot. I know we had a rough year too with my teaching team. We had several go out on maternity leave, which of course is wonderful, but you have to cover everything, and then you're not sure if they're coming back, and then with sickness and all of that as well. And some of my teachers are professional musicians, and so sometimes they have gigs or other things. So that's a great recommendation to do teaching teams. I like that.
It's not necessarily feasible for private. So that's tricky in that style of studio. But if it's a group situation, I cannot rave about it enough.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, Whitney, it's been so fun getting to know you a little bit. Is there anything else that I should have asked you that you want to share?
I would recommend is spending time researching, whether it be within online communities, within teacher communities, within your market, really, really finding the pulse of what's out there, what people want, because every community is different and it is unique. And so what works here might not work somewhere else. But if you can find what resonates most with you and what you most want to bring in the world, and then you can match it with what other people want, in theory you'll feel aligned, you'll feel energized, you'll feel invigorated. Finding those communities that make you get that help bring you joy is so important. Like finding joy all the time and gratefulness all the time, even in the hard days, is such a perspective game changer. And it's something that every morning I remind myself, and I'm not always successful, but when I keep the focus there, it helps everything fall into place easier and better.
Thank you. That was beautiful. If people want to see that beautiful website that you have, or if they want to reach out or follow along with your journey, where can they find you?
So our website is bloommusicstudio.com. Our Instagram is at Bloom Music Studio. Our Facebook, I think, is at Bloom Des Moines. I think they might be linked as well. So, but yeah, that's where we post the most. I do post on TikTok as well, but which is at Bloom Music Studio. And I think that's it for our links.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Whitney. And I know our listeners can't see, but your doodle has joined us. Well, thank you, Whitney. It was so fun talking with you. And thank you for sharing all your wisdom with us today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Whitney, for sharing so candidly with us today on the podcast. I don't know about you, but I wish I could pop into Bloom Music Studio for a day and see the doodles and the kids in action. It sounds like such a welcoming environment and the kind of place that many of us are trying to build in our own studios. I love how she goes out of her way to build community in the studio. I was actually listening to a business podcast today where they were talking about the value of building community first before you try to sell something. And I think as piano teachers, we can learn from that. The idea that if students feel like they belong to something bigger, they will be less likely to leave when life gets busy or other activities pop up. Something for all of us to think about, myself included. That's the end of the show for this week. Next week on the podcast, I'm doing a solo episode called What Should I Play for Church? Now, I know that it might not be applicable for all of you, but if you or your students ever play for church services, be sure to check back next week for that episode. I'm Rachel Ehring, and you've been listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. I'll talk with you again soon.
How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today.